Hi, welcome to Infodumpies. My name's Brianne. I'm autistic, I have ADHD, my pronouns are she, her, and... yeah, I'm getting high so I can learn about the great state of Ohio.
Hi, I'm Violet. My pronouns are she, her. I have ADHD, and I have, in fact, killed a god and taken the throne as Elden Lord. I think I'm level like 246.
Yeah?
Yeah, I went with a dexterity and faith build. Sure, that all means
I'm level 420.
level 420. Wow,
I'm level 420.
that's incredibly high level.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I have kind of a short, muscly build.
I love it. It's awesome. You'd probably be like a strength arcane build, I think. So you'd be doing like blood magic and smashing people with a big hammer.
I love that.
Yeah. Be good. Or a big axe, potentially. So
I was hitting the Benjamin for a goof and I should stop so I'm coherent for the rest of this.
Well, I don't know how coherent you want to be necessarily because today I think this is going to be the most info dump that I've done. I'm just going to basically talk about Elden Ring lore for an hour and go through the broad strokes of the world of Elden Ring. And if you think, oh, just the broad strokes, how could that take an hour? My notes are 10 pages long.
This broad strokes. Sure hope she does.
This broad strokes. And this broad is going to stroke the broad strokes of Elden Ring and the lore. The reason that I wanted to talk about Elden Ring is because I am just a really big fan of it. It's kind of my comfort game. If I don't know what else to play, I will play that. And once you have beaten the game and the DLC, you kind of just still want more of it, or at least I do. And I started Googling and going down the rabbit hole, and I understand quite a bit of the lore now. And in doing research for this episode, I feel like I've got most of the lore figured out. A lot of that is thanks to people that have been documenting and talking about the lore of Elden Ring, because there's a lot of mystery, right? This is not the type of thing where they spell out the lore for you. There's not a whole ton of cutscenes saying, first this happened, then this happened, then this happened, and here's where you are now. It's a lot more vague than that. And we'll get into why and the style of the writing and all of that. But so much of this has been pieced together by YouTubers like Vati Vidya and Quaylag. A lot of the Reddit community also has contributed a number of really good theories on things that have yet to be established, as well as some really interesting timelines. But before I go into all that, what is Elden Ring? Do you know what Elden Ring is, Brianne? Just the game?
Okay, so this is part of why I thought it would be good if I was higher than normal for this episode, because I don't know anything other than Violet likes playing it, and sometimes she fights people with a big finger, and there's a lot of fucked up big people, and I'm sure the neurodivergent audience here understands changing words for fun, and you have your own weird language at home because you've changed so many words. So I call the game Old Him Rim. And that's about where I'm at. So I'm like, hey baby, you gonna go play some Old Him Rim?
Yeah, I'm gonna go.
She's like,
rim some old hymn.
Guess rim some old hymns. Yeah. So I do joke that when I don't understand instructions or what someone's saying, that my ADHD just plays the Dawson's Creek theme song. So given the little bits of lore she's tried to tell me previously, I expect that to happen a couple times, but I'm on board, and yeah. I'll be hitting that Pennifer Aniston.
Yeah. My theory is that you'll either be like, wow, this is a pretty interesting story, it's pretty well written, or you'll be like, this is nonsense and I can't follow it and I'm too high for this. So
you've already told me who's written it, so I have some preconceived opinions.
One thing to mention before I kind of get into the basics of like what is Elden Ring the game, it's important to note that the way the game is written, and part of the reason I've ended up with such an exhaustive knowledge of the lore, is it's difficult to understand anything unless you understand quite a few related things, because there's a whole lot of weird nebulous concepts that require you to go look up some other thing, and that understanding that requires you to go look up another thing. So it's quite the rabbit hole. But it is a video game. It was released in 2022. It's an action role-playing game developed by a company called From Software. And if you are familiar with From Software, you've probably heard of a couple other games that they've released called Dark Souls, Dark Souls 2, Dark Souls 3, Bloodborne, Sekiro, all of these games.
I know trans ladies are wild about those games.
Oh yeah, we are. Absolutely.
Like trans lesbians especially.
Yeah.
So
and it's because we love a challenge, right? FromSoft games are known for being very, very challenging. A big part of the appeal is the game is very, very difficult. It's a very unforgiving world, and yet you manage to triumph over it, right? You hone your skills and you manage to come out the other side in a pretty objectively unfair situation that is tilted against you. It really gives you a feeling of success, basically, is the goal. And
wow, that makes sense why so many trans ladies like it then.
Yeah. Checks
yeah,
out.
like when you I have objectively succeeded in a very unfair and cruel and unforgiving world.
Yeah, it feels
like,
good.
Oh, yeah, okay. That's achievable in these games.
Exactly. The game was developed by From Software. It was published by Bandai Namco Entertainment. It was directed by Hidetaka Miyazaki, with world building provided by a little writer that you probably never heard of called George R.R. Martin. And
more like George R.R. fartin'.
He probably do be fartin', honestly. He probably should be George R.B. Fartin' rather than R.R. Martin.
Farting around rather than finishing a series. I don't even read it, and I'm frustrated on behalf of people who do.
Yeah, and I'll be fully honest, I'm not a huge literature person, to be fully honest. I am a video game media person. That's generally where I like to consume my storylines. That and podcasts.
Are you aware that he has not finished the Game of Thrones series?
No. Honestly, I kind of forgot he was the Game of Thrones person.
So, yeah, Game of Thrones finished the television show. I think it had like 6 seasons.
Yeah.
He had not finished the series before that. It's been over for years.
Jesus.
Still has not finished it.
That's silly. That's just ridiculous. He's probably got some like diverging plotline stuff going on. But anyway, basically, the game part was directed by Hidetaka Miyazaki, which I'm just going to call him Miyazaki from here out, not to be confused with other Miyazakis in popular media that you may be familiar with. That the world building and the writing aspects of the story were provided by George R.R. Martin. So they wanted to kind of keep it distinct, and they gave Mr. Martin basically free reign to do whatever he wants writing wise. The goal that From Software gave him was they wanted to create a new open world game based on the Dark Souls series, which is typically a lot more linear. You have to do this, then you have to do this, then you have to do this. And if you can't achieve one of those obstacles, you're just kind of stuck. Miyazaki has said that he is a fan of Martin's previous work and hoped that his contributions would basically provide a more accessible narrative than the company's earlier games, which, if you don't know anything about the earlier games narratives, they're weird and incredibly hard to follow. Elden Ring is weird and a little bit easier to follow. It's more cohesive than the previous series.
Just a little bit easier.
It's well written. It's weird, but it's well written, and the way that the game gives you information, primarily you get the story through the descriptions on the items you collect. So the things that you get around the world will usually tell you what the item is, and then it will give you a little snippet of lore related to that item. an item you can get, for example, is the remembrance of a person, right? A legendary person of some sort. And we'll get into what all that is in a bit, but it'll tell you what the remembrance does, and then it'll tell you about the person who the remembrance is from, and like a little bit of their lore, and all sorts of things that are related to that person adjacently will have little snippets, and you kind of put it together over time as you play through.
So, like, hard to follow. Is it hard to follow in a similar way that, like, David Lynch stuff is, but you're like, I'm still having a great time, so no complaints. I don't have to understand that Garmin Boja is a metaphor for human suffering to enjoy these little weirdos, freaky weirdos barfing up cream corn. I can just enjoy it and have a good time.
Elden Ring, yes. The previous games, not so much.
No. Okay.
But Elden Ring,
okay.
I would say yes. Elden Ring definitely plays into that realm of, this doesn't make sense, but I'm asking you to suspend your disbelief that this is just how it works in this world. And that's part of how we get into the rules of the way the world work are part of the story. And like the rules of the laws of nature in Elden Ring are part of the established story, like how those came to be. Elden Ring is a good game. It won Game of the Year awards. It's been cited as one of the greatest games of all time. 28 million copies sold. The DLC Shadow of the Erdtree that came out sold over 5 million copies. There's another like a spin-off multiplayer focused game coming out called Elden Ring Night Rain, scheduled for sometime this year, I think possibly next month. It's poppin'. It's good. People love it. The story, right? Where do we begin with all of that? So before I even start with who you play as, I kind of need to tell you about the place that it takes, the setting, right?
Ohio.
Unfortunately, it's not Ohio. Well,
that's the other only thing I know about Elden Ring is that there were jokes that it's set in Ohio.
The world is called the Lands Between. It doesn't say it's not Ohio, but everyone refers to it as the Lands Between. Ohio may be the Lands Between.
Maybe.
Yeah. So the Lands Between, it's basically a really big kind of like continent that has a whole bunch of different geography, and it's very vertical. Thousands of years before the game takes place, life in the Lands Between was centered around a great tree. And when I say great tree, I mean massive, like a half mile tall, like unfathomably large tree called the Great Tree. This great tree housed within it something called the Crucible, which is essentially the chaotic primordial soup of life. It is animalistic. Creatures were popping out of it, all sorts of left and right. It was a chaotic time. The world at this point was ruled varyingly by either giants or dragons, depending on what area of the world of the Lands Between you were in. Primarily higher elevation areas generally are ruled by the dragons. Skies and stuff like that are going to be the domain of the dragons. There's a sky city called Farah Mazula, which is literally a floating sky city that the dragons live in. There is a really high mountaintop area that is inhabited by the giants primarily, just called Mountaintop of the Giants. They're pretty straightforward like that. I respect it.
That's what it is on the label. Yeah,
exactly.
I like that.
Yeah. And so this is kind of the structure of things. There are smaller races kind of mixed in there as well, some primordial forms of humans and all sorts of creatures that, you know, are more familiar to us today. The unevolved forms, basically, of these creatures. We can tell that the giants and the dragons that were existing at this point were likely much, much larger than the ones we actually see in the game, because throughout the game, you can actually see things like unfathomably large humanoid skulls sticking out of sections of exposed rock and cliff faces. Like, from a distance, you can't quite tell. Like, it's like, oh, that's just a cliff face. You get closer and you realize, oh, that's a fossilized skull that's 500 meters tall.
So kind of like when you see like prehistoric bugs and they hold them up to modern bugs to scale, you're like, that wasp was how fucking big?
Yeah.
No, thank you.
Orders of magnitude larger. For example, there was a dragon named Grandsax, an ancient dragon who was nearly half the size of what would become the capital city of the game, of the world at this point.
Whoa,
Yeah.
Dragon City.
Literally, yeah. You could stand next to one of this dragon's teeth and not even be half the size of it.
Whoa.
Yeah. Absolutely massive scale, these giants and dragons. There at this time also is a god of dragons and a god of giants and several other gods. Yeah. There's a whole host of gods. And one thing to talk about here is there's gods and then there's outer gods. Outer gods are things that are less often worshipped, and they're like kind of like cosmic entities. Less, okay. Yeah, sort of like
so like Loki versus like the Eternals.
Yeah, I think that's a good frame of reference. So in this case, there's the dragon god of dragons, there's the god of the giants, and then there is an outer god called the Greater Will. This outer god called the Greater Will, there's some theories that it was previously merged with another outer god to form the Great One, like a singular overarching deity. This is the god amongst gods kind of gods, and then something,
King of Kings, Lord of Lords.
Yeah, something happened and there's another deity, an outer god similar to the Greater Will that's related to it, and I'll touch on that in a little while. But the main thing to know is that this distant cosmic god called the Greater Will decided that it wanted to impose its will and its idea of right and wrong and law and order on the lands between. So it sent a divine star called the Elden Star to the lands between in the form of a meteor. The star crashed into the lands between, deformed it some, formed a big crater, and this star contained a creature known as the Elden Beast. The Elden Beast is essentially a vassal of the Greater Will.
That's the nickname I got for my hog.
Vassal of the Greater Will or the Elden Beast?
No, the Elden Beast.
Okay, that makes more sense. That's totally fair. Vassal of the Greater Will is kind of a baller name, though. The Greater Will sent the star. The star had within it the Elden Beast, which took the form of the Elden Ring to impose the Greater Will, basically colonize the lands between and establish a set of laws of nature and reality. Now, this ring was not a literal ring, but a collection of magical runes that dictated the laws of life, the laws of death, the laws of time, the laws of order, the law of causality, like cause and effect, the law, a law of regression, that all things will tend towards their origin state, kind of like entropy in reverse in a way, but that's one of the laws specifically mentioned is the law of regression. These are general concepts and philosophies that also bend the way the world works in the lands between. That is how powerful the Greater Will is and how powerful the Elden Ring is. What runes are in the Elden Ring determine how the world works, essentially. Because previously it was all chaos, there was no rules, all sorts of things were happening. There were dragons and giants, and there's massive scale differences of things. There's very little order. There are creatures with 100 horns. There's creatures with, eyes that will turn you to stone. The Greater Will said, this is too chaotic. I want some order. I'm going to make some order.
This is a little much. Here's my rule book. It's in the form of a ring of runes.
Exactly. Now, the Greater Will, being an outer god, needed a vessel to protect the Elden Ring and enact its will. And generally that would come in the form of a god, not an outer god, just a god. And in this universe, it's helpful to think of gods as like people that don't really have to follow the rules of reality, but they are a person you can go and look at. So a person can become a god in this world, and you can know that person after they become a god. They gain immense power from that, and they can often change physically in a lot of ways from becoming a god. They gain all sorts of things, and we'll get into that, but that's the way this works. During this time period, it's possible that the Greater Will maybe allowed the Lord of the Dragons, Placidusax, to be the vessel.
That's a horrible name. That's a horrible name.
It's a rough name. I'm not a fan of it. Placidusax? Yeah, it's rough. Anyway, he was the Lord.
Placentasac?
The names are going to be interesting when we get into the names some more, because there's a lot of them that sound extremely similar, and I'm so sorry. So Dragonlord Placenta
Okay.
Sac.
Placenta sac.
The Dragonlord Placenta Sac, possibly. We don't have a lot of information because this was thousands of years ago in the context of the game. Maybe was the vessel of the Elden Ring for some time, but at some point, the age of dragons and giants came to an end, and a new vessel was needed. Also, at some point during this process, and I may have the timing wrong, but at some point, there was an ancient kind of like primordial humanity group called the Nox, and Nox, and the Nox lived in the eternal cities of Nokron and Noxtella. And these people were here before the Greater Will, and they were like, we don't like this whole thing that's trying to take everything over and impose, they're trying to colonize us, basically. Mm-hmm. So in response, they crafted a weapon that could kill vassals of the Greater Will. Kill envoys of the Greater Will specifically. Envoy being a speaker, a person who speaks for the Greater Will. They crafted a weapon that could kill those things, which we'll get into what those are in a bit because that's complicated. And then they also created helms or helmets that would allow them to resist the kind of psychic influence of the Greater Will.
Like Magneto's helmet.
Almost exactly. It's called a Nox mirror helm, and it's literally a helmet with mirrors all over it, kind of like a tinfoil hat. The Greater Will considered this treasonous, so it used a void beast, literally a creature from the outer reaches of the cosmos, to come and attack the Nox and sink their cities into the earth, literally bury them underground into these large caverns, because they gained their power from the stars in the sky. The Nox did. So he buried them underground as a punishment for their treason. There were some great rivers and stuff. All that got buried for committing treason against the Greater Will.
You know, all of my evangelical Christian upbringing and education has really prepared me for this episode.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of references to colonization and like Inquisition style
the convoluted stuff about we sunk your city, all the other stuff. I was like, oh yeah, this feels very biblical.
Oh yeah, it feels very biblical. I totally agree. I could see the connection there.
Yeah, one God who's actually more than one God, but has an emissary that they sent to Earth that is also part of them. Yeah, okay.
All, yeah. And for the record, the Elden Beast is basically like a giant like space, like a Charizard made of space and glowing golden light.
Cool.
Kind of. Yeah, less cool than a Charizard, but vaguely, yeah, like very blobby. It's weird. If you Google Elden Beast,
blobby Charizard, that sounds pretty cool, babe.
That's pretty cool, actually. Yeah, but if you Google Elden Beast, it'll show you a picture of the Elden Beast, which, for a number of reasons, that was basically the original form. It's the true form of the Elden Ring, essentially. It's pretty gloopy, right?
The head looks like a flaccid dick.
Yeah, it kind of does. Honestly.
Head looks like a big old flaccid dick.
Compared to a lot of the other creatures in the game, it's pretty silly.
Yeah, it's got like a light up starry nervous system, and you can see some bones, and it's got like someone stuck on a bunch of like mismatched wings on the back, and it got spindly little arms that very much say Mom. This very much reminds me of the arms in that meme. It's like, Mom, I froed up.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the neck droops downward and kind of has, I mean, it looks like a dick tip. I'm not gonna lie.
That's fair.
It looks like a big flaccid wiener. Anyway, continue.
Well, this game is full of weird designs, and if something looking like a dick is the worst of it, then, I mean, buckle up. There's a point in this setup where, and I haven't figured out exactly where this is, but at some point there are these human groups called, there's a Carrion family and a Raya Lucarian family. The family called like the Raya Lucaria and the Carrion family. They do magic, right? They do sorcery specifically, powered by the stars. Kind of like how the Nox do, but these people didn't rebel against the Greater Will. they were like, all right, whatever, man, we're going to keep doing our magic, but you're cool with us. We're not going to fight back. These groups established schools of magic. There's the Academy of Raya Lucaria, and the Carrion family establishes control of an area in the Lands Between called Liurnia. It's important to note that those have been around for a long time. The Greater Will, having turned against the dragons and Placidusax, sought to establish a new order called the Golden Order. In order to do this, it needed envoys to spread its will and its messages, and a vassal to enact its will and house the Elden Ring, essentially. So it made that happen. Back before the Elden Ring even arrived in the Lands Between, a daughter of the Greater Will named Metyr, Metyr, was sent in a meteor, similar to how the Elden Beast arrived. But I believe Metyr came before even the Elden Beast, potentially. I'm not entirely sure which came first, chicken or the egg. But this daughter of the Greater Will was sent there in order to birth the envoys that will receive messages from the cosmos to pass them along to the people of the Lands Between. Metyr is a monstrous being made from fingers.
Oh, I hate it.
Yeah, she's really creepy looking. She's got like a big beady eye in the middle of a thumb for a head, like a literal thumb for a head.
A little
She's
thumb ass.
Covered in fingers.
No, like an awful Cronenberg thumb.
Worse than you're probably picturing. She's really creepy looking.
I don't know. It's pretty bad.
If you want to Google Metyr Mother of Fingers, you've been warned. The beings known as the Two Fingers are the children of Metyr Mother of Fingers. And it's important to note that when I say the Two Fingers, there are multiple sets of two fingers.
She looks like Fingers having an orgy.
Yes, rough.
That's rough.
Yeah. Outer gods, man. They got weird stuff going on.
Yeah,
Eldritch
that's
horror.
rough.
Yeah.
Like I said, Cronenberg finger monster. I'm not far off.
You're not, yeah. There is a type of creature called a Two Fingers. One of the two fingers has an appearance resembling part of a giant hand with like a slight crease indentation in the palm. They have two finger-like appendages on top, hence the name the Two Fingers. Those are what the Two Fingers are. And these are the envoys. They receive messages from the Greater Will and communicate them to the people. There are these people known as finger readers, and their whole job,
naturally.
Yeah. Their whole job.
It seems ineffectual to make your envoys to communicate creatures that are two fingers, but okay.
God works in mysterious ways.
I guess.
But anyway, there are these women, and I don't know how they came out to be. There's these women known as finger readers who interpret the wriggling of the fingers and communicate verbally the will of the Greater Will. They, the Two Fingers, are also responsible for selecting Empyreans. Empyreans are people who have the potential to become a god and therefore the next vessel for the Elden Ring.
So like a potential slayer in Buffy.
Yeah, like a potential slayer in Buffy, right? You have the potential. If you are selected to become an Empyrean, you are kind of leashed to the will of the Greater Will. Like you are essentially saying, all right, I'm going to do your bidding as a vessel for your Elden Ring and uphold your Golden Order. And in exchange, they are granted a shadow-bound beast to protect them and guide their path towards inheriting the Elden Ring someday. And a shadow-bound beast usually is the form of a wolf or a wolf man of some sort. Yeah.
The Minnesota Dog Man.
Very much like a Minnesota Dog Man. They can speak and talk, and they have like a wolf's head and a furry man's body generally. And they are basically the guardian for that Empyrean.
Have you seen the furry community who's in the Elden Ring like these guys a lot?
Oh,
have you seen much of that?
Oh, yeah.
I imagine.
There's a very nice character named Blide, who is one of the Shadowbound
Sorry,
beasts.
it's like Clyde with a B.
Basically, it's Blaid, I think.
Blide, like Clyde with a B.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry,
But yeah.
that's real funny.
But yeah, Blide is very loyal and just a generally cool person. They're called shadows of the Empyreans, basically. They are kind of like, they're in a sense blood related, so it's kind of like they're creating magically, divinely, creating you a half brother or half sibling that is half outer god, wolf person, half your blood to
Cool.
like ensure that loyalty, right? And they're there to protect you. That's the role of the two fingers. They are the envoys. They're trying to spread the message, get the right people in line. One day, a woman named Merica, who is a shaman in a village, she is a member of a race called the Numen.
Newman.
Yeah. It's Numen. The Numen are kind of mysterious. There's not a lot of them. They're described as long-lived but seldom born. Doesn't explain why. There's not a lot of information. But Merica is a Numen. At some point, she was recognized as an Empyrean by the two fingers, or one of the two fingers, I should say, and gifted a shadow-bound beast, her half-brother, Malekith. She later ascended to godhood and became the vessel for the Elden Ring, becoming Queen Merica the Eternal, signaling the dawn of the new age of the Golden Order. Queen Merica transformed that original crucible, the Great Tree, into the Golden Erd Tree under the guidance of the two fingers as part of her ascension. So by creating this Golden Order, she literally gilded the Great Tree. And in the game, at one point, you actually enter the tree and can see that the exterior is made of gold, the interior is wood. The Golden Order begins. We're getting closer to where the player actually starts the game. If you recall, Farum Azula, the city of the dragons, right? Great temple in the sky, struck by a meteorite at some point by the outer gods. It's unclear whether this meteorite is the Elden Beast when it arrived, or if this was just a separate meteor, but at some point, Farum Azula is struck by a massive meteor, and the floating city begins to crumble. Chunks of Farum Azula, large, small, huge, massive chunks, little rubble pieces, all fall down to the lands between and land in various places. And from a gameplay perspective, this actually kind of improves the travel conditions for people, because they tend to be conveniently landing and acting like a bridge or a vantage point or cover. So it's a clever excuse to vary the environment. Like I said, the Crucible is taken over by the greater will through Merica becoming a god, and it causes it to be gilded. It shines without end. So there is basically this like eternally glowing golden tree that is as large, as tall as the continent is wide, looming over everything. And initially, people are like, what the fuck is going on? This is kind of wild. But eventually, the Golden Order begins to be further established. She gets more people working under her, people dedicated to the Golden Order. There are wars of conquest that get waged in the land between. The Golden Order is always the aggressor, and they're always based out of the capital city of Leyndell. So the capital city of Leyndell, the Golden Order, they're basically going on the Spanish Inquisition, saying either join the Golden Order and get with these new rules that the Greater Will is imposing, or rather Merica is imposing, because Merica, the Golden Order, part of that is basically saying Merica is the one true God. The Greater Will and her relation to that is kind of her little secret. She's not like touting that this, she's, you know, basically an insider plant from a whole other god, right? She's basically saying, I'm the one true God, you need to follow me or get out of the way. And so all these wars of conquest are waged. There are creatures called the Misbegotten that are enslaved by the humans of the Golden Order, and they are seen as basically remnants from the Crucible era, and they're like kind of the natives and they are essentially seen as like blasphemous against the Golden Order. They are beings of chaos and disorder, and they are less worthy. So they are literally enslaved by the Golden Order. Misbegotten tend to have more, they're humanoids, but they have more bestial features. So they have like wider mouths, spikier teeth. Sometimes they'll have like bat-like wings or like clawed feet, kind of like a chicken or a bird. They've got kind of like scraggly hair or fur. They can come in a variety of different shapes and sizes. There's a lot of variance to them. Again, coming from the chaotic crucible originally. These misbegotten are enslaved by the Golden Order. And as part of this Gold Order conquest that's going on, Merica recruits a warrior named Horaloo. Hoarah space Lous. Horaloo. And Horaloo was once a chieftain of the Badlands, which you'll hear the Badlands mentioned a few times. There's no area in the lands between called the Badlands, so it's somewhere else. It's kind of unspecified. It's weird. I don't know why there's no place called the Badlands, but the Badlands is basically somewhere else that we don't see. Merica recruits Horaloo, chieftain of the Badlands, and he is given the title Godfrey, first Elden Lord. He is the consort of Merica and marries her. Marries into becoming a king and a demigod through the powers of Merica.
The powers of America.
The powers of Merica. Godfrey is also given a lion-like beast regent. It's kind of like a lion spirit. There's not a whole lot of detail on it, but this lion spirit thing is named Sirash. Sirash's purpose is to supplement his might in battle, but also lessen his bloodlust as this like berserker type warrior. Sirash is kind of a stimulant where it's needed and a depressant where it's needed, if that makes sense. He keeps Horaloo from being Horaloo and makes him more a proper Elden Lord. So he's not this like Badlands chieftain anymore. He acts more proper thanks to the bloodlust being tamped down by Sirash. But it also, he can use him to fight if needed, because there's still a war going. He still needs to fight. Godfrey, under the banner of the Golden Order, defeats the giants and confines their flame. They have an eternal flame granted to them by their god. And this flame, called the Flame of the Fell God, was created once the Erd Tree happened. The god of the giants, which was still around, basically said, I'm going to make a flame that will never stop burning, ever, and someday I prophesize it will burn down the Erd Tree.
The lithium battery in a Tesla.
Exactly. Obviously, the Golden Order sees the giants and their god for doing this as blasphemers. They're saying, oh, it's going to burn down the Erd Tree someday, and we're making this thing specifically to spite you. Merica has Godfrey fight and defeat the giants at the mountaintops of the giants, and confines their flame at the highest peak of the mountaintops of the giants. All of the giants are dead except for one, and this last remaining fire giant, Merica curses him to forever guard that flame and never let anyone approach it or let it be used against the Golden Order. He's just eternally wandering, killing anyone who comes near the flame. At some point during these wars of conquest, a warrior named Radagon appears. Radagon is someone who has some affinity for magic, but they're not like a bloodlusty, like berserker type warrior. They're a little bit more refined. They've got red hair, something that is typically unique to giants. And there is a possibility, it's theorized that Radagon may have some giant ancestry because he is notably twice as tall as most people.
That's why my hair is red.
Exactly.
And why I'm so
huge,
tall.
Huge, exactly.
It's massive.
And Radagon, formidable warrior, he would go on to also lead the army in a number of battles. And while this is all happening, Merica and Godfrey have a child that is a demigod This demigod child is named Godwyn, later called Godwyn the Golden. Very much a golden boy, like long golden hair, super righteous, super good. Everyone loves him. He went on to be a very faithful servant of the Golden Order. Merica and Godfrey later had twin demigod children, Morgoth and Mohg. However,
synthesizer.
right? It's actually Mohg.
Oh, like Worf, son of Mohg.
Oh, yeah, kind of. So Morgoth and Mohg, whether by luck or by the greater will, both are children born as something called an omen. So omens are humans that are born cursed.
Oh, me.
They are cursed in that they are born with horns, curved curly horns covering their entire body.
Oh, not me.
Yeah, not you. Yeah. If you are a commoner and your child is born and they are an omen, the tradition that happens is their horns are cut off, which usually results in the death of the child.
Jesus Christ.
It's dark. Yeah. If you are a noble person, such as a god and a demigod, like Merica and Godfrey, you don't have to do that. What ends up happening instead is the horns remain intact, but they banish you to the sewers under the capital city of Leyndell.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yikes.
Yikes. Yeah. That being said, Morgoth, like his brother Godwyn, despite this, remains loyal to the Golden Order and his family. For some reason. I think he maybe sees himself...
bitch.
Yeah, I think for reasons you'll see later on, he may see himself as the rightful heir to the throne, but we'll get into that. Mohg, on the other hand, harbors resentment and rage towards those who denied him his freedom for simply being born, and rebels, trying to find a new way forward, and we'll get into how he does that in a bit. The giants have been taken care of by the Golden Order. The war with the dragons now begins when the great dragon Grandsax, largest of all dragons, possibly, or an extremely large ancient dragon, invades Leyndell by crashing his fucking body into it. A dragon the size of half the city body slams the city. Riddle me this, he is defeated somehow and turned to stone somehow. It's not specified.
The power and love of Jesus Christ.
I don't know. It could have been Merica doing some magic or divine incantations. I don't know. We don't know. It's unspecified. It's weird. But there's a giant petrified dragon in the middle of Leyndell called Grandsax. During the Dragon War, Godwyn the Golden, son of Godfrey and Merica, fights the dread dragon Fortisax.
These names suck.
They suck, I know. The names are not great.
40 sacks? How many balls you got?
Fortisax, yeah. Fortisax and Godwyn fight each other, but they don't kill each other and actually they do kind of an enemies, not to lovers, but to friends kind of thing. And they actually become friendly with each other. Kind of as a result of that, the war with the dragon ends. And the dragons are allowed to remain. Next, the Golden Order waged war against the Carians of Liurnia Academy and Rhea Lucaria, if you recall those, the magic-y people. Mm-hmm. The wars are between those groups happened at separate points, I believe. They're mentioned, but they're not detailed. But they were essentially noted as being equally matched. So they kind of butted heads, the Golden Order and these magic users, and they weren't able, neither one came up a clear leader. During these battles, however, Radagon, if you recall, the guy probably descended from giants, who is a very powerful person, dabbles in magic, falls in love with Renala. Renala is not originally a demigod. She is the head of the Carian royal family, but she does fall in love with Radagon, and the war is called off. So peace is declared, and the Carian family and the Golden Order kind of symbolically merge. Radagon and Renala have a wedding. They get married, probably by a giant tortoise pope, which I think is pretty cool.
Cool.
Yeah, it's a pretty dope. You can actually go and talk with this tortoise pope guy. He's chill as hell. Ratigan and Renala have 3 children. Ratigan, by the way, did become a demigod thanks to Merica, basically saying like, hey, you're cool as fuck. I'm going to make you a demigod. They have 3 children together. Radon, who would later become a general. Rykard, who would later do some crazy blasphemous shit for power. And then Ronnie, who is an extremely skilled sorceress. Ronnie.
Sorry, it's just funny. It's just funny. Melfisor, Kivloff, and Greg.
Radon,
is the energy.
Rykard, and Ronnie.
Ronnie.
Not the typical
Ronnie.
spelling. This is R-A-N-N-I, and this is for a feminine presenting character. Ronnie.
Okay, short for Veronica. It's Veronica.
Ronnie is a skilled sorceress, much like her mother Renala, and Ronnie is actually chosen to be an Empyrean by the one of the 2 fingers. They basically say, hey, you have the potential to become a god. Ronnie wasn't super happy about this. She doesn't really want to go along with all that. She wants to go her own way. She ends up meeting a snow witch named Renna and becomes her apprentice, so that eventually Ronnie becomes known as Ronnie the Witch, also an Empyrean, potentially a god. At this point, another Empyrean, known as the Gloam-Eyed Queen, comes in and gets involved. The Gloam-Eyed Queen is an Empyrean that is able to tap into the Elden Ring and uses the power of the Rune of Death to kill gods. It's not really explained what gods they killed, but they do that. As a result of this, the Gloam-Eyed Queen ends up trying to get... I think I may have missed a step, actually. God, it's so complicated. So there's a point where, probably at the direction of the Greater Will, possibly at a desire for a more pure Golden Order, Merica takes the Rune of Death out of the Elden Ring, removes it from the Elden Ring. The ramifications of this are pretty big. She basically turns off the concept of permanent death in the Lands Between by doing this. She gives the Rune of Death to her shadow beast, Malekith, to keep safe. This other Empyrean, at one point named the Gloam-Eyed Queen, tries to come and take it to get the power, but fails and gets defeated. There's a whole other thing in there, but I don't have time to go into it. Because she tried to take it, Malekith hid the Rune of Death within a weapon called the Black Blade to help keep it safe. At some point during all of this, Merica begins to research more about the origins of the Greater Will and the Golden Order that she is championing. It's unclear what all she was aware of when she decided to become a god and vessel of the Elden Ring, but she took the job, and likely after all of these wars were over, she kind of was like, you know what, let me look a little bit more into this now that we're not at war. Looking into this, there's a quote where she asks her comrades why they falter after declaring her intent to basically do a deep dive into the will, the Greater Will, and where it came from, what it's doing, all of this. She was likely denied help from her subjects in researching this because they didn't want to be seen as heretical, which kind of makes sense. The people that knew about the Greater Will knew that that was where Merica came from, and if she's the one true god, then that is the true god of gods. So they don't help her. She discovers something about the Greater Will. It's unclear exactly what. She basically comes to despise the Greater Will, the Elden Beast, the Elden Ring, and the Golden Order. My best guess, and a lot of people's theory, is that it was discovered that the Elden Beast or the Greater Will or something caused the destruction of her people, the Newmen, and like their homeland. And that's why they're seldom seen. And I think she was upset about that. She comes up with a plan. Godfrey, the first Elden Lord, with no one to fight, all of the wars are finished. He kind of just gets bored and like has no purpose anymore. Merica divorces him and sends him away, exiles him, basically saying, you've lost the grace of gold. I have no use for you further. And this is part of the plan. Godfrey and his army are sent away back into the Badlands, and they are told, fight in your wars in the Badlands, become stronger, do so out of the sight of the greater will. But one day, she promises them, they will return to the lands between. Divested of the grace of the Golden Order, they become known as the Tarnished, and they are seen as like lowly, bad, stinky exiles. They are banished from the lands between, and they go on a journey called the Long March to the land across the fog, the borderlands, or wherever it is out there, somewhere else we don't see. And the most important thing before we get to the player character coming in that happens is Ranni the Witch decides, I also don't want to be involved with the greater will. I don't want to do this. I don't want to be an Empyrean. And the only way to stop being an Empyrean is to die. But a demigod can't die because Merica removed the Rune of Death from the Elden Ring. So how does she stop from becoming a vessel of the greater will? She basically manages to steal a fragment of the Rune of Death from Malekith, the guardian shadow of Merica, uses that fragment of the Rune of Death to craft a blade made of a fragment of the Rune of Death with the power to cause a true death in someone, despite the rune being removed from the Elden Ring, also called destined death. Ranni sends a group of people that she helped train called the Black Knives to go and assassinate Godwyn the Golden, son of Merica, her firstborn child. And the goal of this is to kill Godwyn the Golden in soul, but not in body, because this knife and the way the Rune of Death works is basically you can kill one or the other or both, but it doesn't necessarily have to be the same on the same person. So she uses this blade crafted from the Rune of Death to kill Godwyn's soul and her own body, and then transfers her body using sorcery into a puppet.
What?
Uses a fragment of the Rune of Destined Death to kill her body so that it's no longer tied to the greater will. Transfers her body into a puppet, a magical puppet that she created, so that she can continue living and existing and doing things in the world free of the greater will. Because of this, Godwyn is dead in body only, in soul only. His soul has been killed permanently. It's gone. Typically, what would happen when people die because Merica removed the Rune of Death, their souls return to the Erd Tree, and after some time, they're reincarnated back into the world. And if for some reason that can't happen or something goes wrong, they're reincarnated as an omen. Godwyn, dead soul, living body, he becomes basically undead, and because he is a demigod, his body begins to like rot and decay and like infest the lands between with something called death root, and it makes more undead people happen and more curses happen and more omens happen and all sorts of things start going wrong. The Golden Order kind of starts to fall apart at the seams. This beautiful golden paradise where no one can truly die and everyone reincarnates is falling apart before Merica's eyes. On top of that, her firstborn child is now dead. She's lost control of everything. So what does she do? She shatters the Elden Ring that she is the vessel for. And this plunges the lands between into chaos. The rules of law and order and everything as we know it have ceased to function properly. When this happens, the grace of the Golden Order is extended to the Tarnished once again, and they are brought back to the lands between as they die. So they die, they lose their memories for some reason, they wake up in the lands between, and now they can see the greater will's direction in the hopes that they may ascend and become the next Elden Lord. There's a whole shattering war that happens that I don't have time to get into, where all the demigods try and fight to become the next Elden Lord, but there's no clear winner. So then the Tarnished get the chance to become the next Elden Lord. You, the player, are one of the Tarnished waking up and having the chance to become the next Elden Lord.
That's wild that is all before the game.
The start of the game is you witnessing other Tarnished coming back and waking up, basically.
That is a lot of lore that happens before the game even starts.
It's a lot.
My kind of lore is there are Pokemon in the world and you are 10. Pick one of them.
Yeah, that's good lore too. The craziness that happens like before the player even comes into the world is wild, and there's so much more lore in the world. Like, I haven't even touched on the Godskin apostles and their god hunt. They use Godskin to grant themselves the power to cause destined death or true death.
I'll tell you, baby, I listen, and the Dawson's Creek theme song was playing, but I'm sure there is some transbian who's like, yes, tell me more.
Oh yeah, no, there's so much more. The whole thing, like Moog, the Omen son, he tries to become the Lord of Blood. Maybe I'll do a follow-up at some point and go even further into the
Elden
lore.
Ring Part 2.
Yeah, maybe so. But thanks for listening.
Thank you,
I know that was a lot.
I'm just high and looking at you.
Well, hey, that's all I can ask for.
This episode, you can thank our Patreon supporters like Bethany Glass, Percy, Chamberlain Foreman, Nunya B, Kate Michigoose, K Genius, Chibs1012, Dave Perrell, Megan E, Carl Brooks, Natasha Neves, Gus Lutzi, Helen Clifford, B Trossler, Sewing Seraph, Rachel Rachelson, Fintago, and Randy Lovings. You know the deal. If you want to support the show, you can do so by telling other people about the show. We don't take paid ads, and we don't pay for ads. So the way we grow is entirely by word of mouth. So tell your friends, tell your family, tell, I don't know, maybe your enemy would also like it. Maybe your enemy's into Elden Ring. But maybe don't tell your enemy. If they're an enemy of someone who listens to the show, I probably don't want them as a listener. But anyway, tell people about the show. It helps us out. If you want to help us out even more, you can subscribe on your podcatcher of choice, because that helps the algorithm know to show us to people who like similar stuff and gets us a little more seen in the algos. If you want to help us even further, you can leave a review or rating on your podcatcher of choice. It helps us in similar fashion. And if you are in a place to help us financially, you can go to the show details and find a link to the Mixnomer Patreon. And on the Mixnomer Patreon, you get bonus material for the shows we do now, any shows we do in the future. It's all going to be there. It's your one-stop shop for supporting this gang of weirdos as we make stuff. If you are not in a place to support us financially, but you still would like to engage with the show more, you can also find a link to our Discord server in the show notes. The Discord server is very fun. As I record this, I will, in a couple of hours, be doing Stitch and Bitch. Violet did an impromptu stream of the game Repo the other night because she was too spooked to play it by herself. Tomorrow night, Violet and I will be playing another Crab's Treasure and doing a stream of that. So a lot of fun stuff happening in the Discord server if you want to come hang out with us. Well, that is all I've got for you this time, my friends. Until next time, clever sign off.